in the beginning of the year, but it took a little while to get going. So it was good to, get it started right away. My name is Amit Verma. For some of you who may not know me, I'm a teacher here at Purdue University. I teach engineering most of the time, but I have been teaching Vedanta for a few years now, maybe 7 years or so. We have done this Tattva Bodha class. That's actually how I started teaching for Hindu Yuva back in 2015, I want to say, 7 years ago. And we studied Tattva Bodha at that time for, I would say, about 2 years or so. It took us till 2017 or 18 when we completed it. And then we took a short break and came back with Vivek Chudamani. Vivek Chudamani was another Prakarana Grantha. You could say that this is it was at a more complicated level. So it took a little bit longer to do Vivek Chudamani. I think we did that one for almost 4 years, between 2018 and 22. And so when the time came to restart, the recommendation from the students was to go back to the basic text, which is Tattva Bodha. I also cover Gita, the Bhagavad Gita or the Gita Dhyan every Sunday at 11 a.m. on behalf of our local Hindu temple. And we covered the entire Gita, but it took us almost 7 years to complete. We started in 2014 odd, and we ended in 2021, all the 18 chapters. Because as you'll see, we get into some detailed discussions. And again, there's no time limit on these, so we just keep going till we, are satisfied with the current level of depth that we've gone into. So after completing it the first time, like all good traditions of Gita Dhyan, we just restarted it. And we restarted it last year, and right now we're in chapter 2. And we've just started the part where Bhagavan Shri Krishna starts talking. And the first 10 verses that he talks are so loaded because Bhagavan opens with everything. So he throws all the answers in one shot in the first 10, 15 verses. So it's taking us a long time to get through them. In fact, we have taken a little bit of a detour, and we've gone into another text just to, look at something that was part of questions and answers in that session. But in the context of that Gita Dhyan, the request came there too, that can there be a session that covers the glossary, the terminology that is used in Vedanta. And I told them that, hey, you know what? We are just about to start Tattva Bodha with the Hindu Yuva. And Tattva Bodha is traditionally referred to as a text that explains all the terminology and the glossary associated with Vedanta. So they were all pretty excited about it. They said, okay, we want to attend that as well. So I shared the invitation to the Gita group, and I'm happy to see there are some of you here from that session. That's the context of how we reached here today. Now, for those of you who thought that this one session of Vedanta is going to tell you everything that you ever wanted to know about Atma, about Brahman, about Ishwar, about the self and self-knowledge, I'm going to have to break your bubble. It's not going to happen in one session. It never does. It takes a long time to cover the material with any level of depth. So if you are just trying it out, just go to a session, see what it's like. I'm fine with that. I have never objected to people joining in at any point. You don't have to start studying Vedanta from the beginning. You can join us at any time because there are no beginning points for a circle. Wherever you join the circle, it's the beginning point for you. This knowledge and its study, as you see, is cyclic in the sense that you have to keep doing it again and again and again and again till it becomes really clear. So a lot of people often think about, oh, I'm going to start this when I have a little bit of time. Or sometimes they will say, well, they're already in the middle of it. They already started it. So I'll wait for it to restart. Then I will join. And so I want to deal with that question right up front. You really don't need to wait for the beginning to start studying Vedanta. You can join in the middle. And yes, it may be rough, but I can tell you this, that even to the people who started from the beginning, it was just as rough. So it was never an easy path. It's one of those things. If you've ever been to a swimming pool, if you've ever been to a swimming pool, or if you've ever been to the ocean or to the lake for a swim, you try to put your toe in there to see how cold the water is. And it's always too cold, isn't it? It's never warm enough. If you put your toe in there, you're like, it's too cold. What do you do then? Well, if it's not Lake Michigan, which is freezing and you're going to get hypothermia, there's only one option. You just jump in with your entire body. That's the only way to jump into the water. So yeah, if you're, dipping your toe in it, so to speak, to get a feeling for what the temperature is like, it's always going to be cold. The water is never warm enough. Even on the sunniest day, even if you go to the ocean on the sunniest day and you dip your toe and you're like, hey, the water's colder than the outside. It always is. And there is only one way to do this right, and that is to just jump right in. Of course, as long as the water is not freezing, it's not going to hurt you, right? So you got to be careful about taking care of yourself. That's very important before you take a journey into this. But as I mentioned earlier, there's only one way to do this, which is with all, it is you're going all in, in order to appreciate what is being talked about. And then it is my tradition when I conduct these sessions that I spend a lot of time talking to the people just to get an understanding of where you are at, what you're coming from, what you hope to gain from these. I'll do that for the first few sessions. When I get later into the Tattva Bodha, people will keep coming and people will keep going. That happens. We saw that last time as well. To the students who have been here for a long time, they get a bit irritated because I'll spend a little bit of time talking to the new people and just getting their motivation, and they're like, can we get on with the material? But I can't do that. I have to spend the time to understand where the people are from, because this is not canned knowledge. I guess that's very important to understand. We're not going to be presenting dead material that you can read on your own and understand and move on. That is not how we are going to approach this. It is supposed to be a lively and vibrant discussion. As you will see, the Tattva Bodha in just a few minutes, its authorship is credited to Sri Shankaracharya. The authorship has been disputed. It has been claimed that it was written by some of his students, not by the original Adi Shankaracharya. As you know, the Shankaracharyas that followed him were also referred to as Shankaracharya. That has got to do with the tradition, the parampara that we are looking at, and we'll talk a little bit more about why the parampara is like that. Towards the end of this text, you will, if you stay with it for a while, you will come to the understanding of why is it that the parampara is set up in such a way that all the authors appear in, it's like the authorship is credited to et al. The first author is Shankaracharya et al. And the et al. Are also Shankaracharya. And why is it like that? It will become evident it will become evident very, very soon in the text, why the Hindus were the way they were, why they did that. It'll become pretty evident. So the authorship is credited to the Adi Shankaracharya, but it has been disputed. And to us as students of the text, we don't care, so to speak. Which book of physics you use doesn't really matter as long as the content of the book is good, is useful, it covers the subject matter, and it works for you. It explains the subject matter well to you. So to us, while the authorship is a topic for historians, it is a topic for scholars, for panditas, it is not of interest to sadhakas. So sadhakas are people who are actually following it and practicing it and not looking to develop scholarship into two different things. For us, it's more important what is inside the text, what is being covered, because as you will find, for any text to gain the status of a prakarna granth. So this is going to happen right now. A prakarna granth, okay, I'll have to explain a little bit now.
Sorry to interrupt you. I had a quick question.
Yes,
actually, two
we're
questions.
open to all questions, so please go ahead.
Yeah, two questions actually. You're talking about Gita discussions. Can you tell us, is it like an in-person discussion, or you guys meet online like similarly on Zoom? And do you guys follow any commentary, or you read the Sanskrit verses and then someone explains it? So this is my first question. Then I'll ask them.
Okay, sounds good. And could you introduce yourself? And if you have a webcam, it would be easier to talk to you as a person. I see a nice photograph of you there in a blue t-shirt, but if you're okay with that, go ahead, Shubham.
Yeah. So hi, Professor. I'm Shubham. I'm a PhD student in EC.
That's good.
I've been reading Gita with some of my friends. We read it weekly, and we do it online. And then I was listening to some other commentary by Swami Sarva. There he was putting a lot of words, Vedanta this, Vedanta that, and I was like, okay, I want to know what the heck all these things are.
Okay.
And suddenly I got to see this post from Shivram today, and I was like, okay, let's see if I like.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I'm going to do also is if I'm sharing my screen and you can still see it, you've asked a very, very good question, and I'll open the floor up to all questions. In fact, this first introductory session, I want us to ask more questions. In fact, I'm going to ask you all a question in a moment here as well. But your first question is very relevant. You asked about the Gita class. Is it online or is it in person? Shubham, it used to be in person every Sunday at the temple. But since the pandemic, which started March of 2020, we moved the class online to Zoom. And it's held on by a Zoom link every Sunday morning at 11 to noon, 12:30. You can get the Zoom link fairly easily. It comes out in a distribution from the temple as well. We have not yet gone back to a live interaction. I can tell you that I really enjoyed the live classes more than I enjoyed the Zoom classes. But the Zoom classes they both have their own advantages. In the Zoom class, I can share the screen a lot easier. We can look at the word meanings a lot easier, and we can talk to each other.
Student, I would really prefer the online version. It saves a lot of time, like going to the temple and coming back.
No, I fully appreciate that. In fact, some of our people who used to attend the Gita class for years traveled away, moved out of this town, and they continued to attend it from different locations in Florida, in Texas. Even some students that have graduated and left attended it for a long time before they, found local chapters that they would much rather attend. So the online version works very well. And the only thing it misses out is I cannot, there is a component that misses out. I cannot quite put my finger or cannot put it in words what it misses out. Mm-hmm. The second question that you asked is very important because we are going to talk about it right now as well. The question that you asked is, what is the translation that we are working? So for both, it's very important to understand the sampradaya and the parampara that I will be covering, because parampara is, of course, very important. The tradition of the Guru Shishya parampara, the lineage, is very important. You will see it play out even in the Tattva Bodha. So I will be teaching both the Tattva Bodha and I also teach the Gita from the translation and commentary provided by Swami Dayananda. Swami Dayananda is no longer, he passed away a few years ago, just a couple of years ago, from Arsha Vidya Gurukulam. That's where I studied. Arsha Vidya Gurukulam is located in Sailorsburg, Pennsylvania, and also has centers in Coimbatore, Rishikesh, and many other places. Swami Dayananda has many students over his career. He was himself a student of Swami Chinmayananda to begin with. So the teachings and the traditions are very much aligned with Swami Chinmayananda. There are minor modifications, and I will explain. They are mostly functional. They are not in the teaching tradition. They are in how the teaching tradition is implemented in day-to-day life. The Chinmaya mission implemented a little bit differently, and Swami Dayananda's Arsha Vidya Gurukulam implemented it a little bit differently. There is not a word of, so philosophically, you will see no daylight between the two. Philosophically, they are 100% aligned. There is not going to be a discordant note philosophically in the understanding of Atma, Brahman, Chit, Sat, none of them. There will be no philosophical misalignment between what I'm going to talk about and what Swami, I'm using Swami Dayananda's translation and commentary. From what he talks about and what Swami Chinmayananda talks about, there is no conflict philosophically. Swami Sarva Priyananda, who you named just a few moments ago, was a visitor recently at, was it just before the pandemic? He visited us.
2019.
2019, just before the pandemic. He visited Hindu Yuva and gave a lecture here. I had the opportunity to host him and spend quite a bit of time talking with him for that short visit, few hours when he was
in
here.
Volk, I think, right? I didn't that as well.
Yeah, it was
in Volk.
Yeah. He came
that was on. Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
So he stayed with us, and we got a chance to talk to him. And there is going to be really no daylight between what I'm going to talk about and what he talked about. So it's fully aligned. There will be no discordant notes. There may be some in implementation in how the lifestyle is implemented. He is, of course, a Swami, a monk, lives in a monastery and lives a monastic life. I am not. So there is differences in implementation, but philosophically, there should be no daylight between what I'm saying and what Swamiji will be teaching, what Swami Chinmayananda will be teaching, what Swami Dayananda or any of his students will be teaching. If there is daylight, it is my mistake, not theirs. Swami Dayananda has many students that became very accomplished Swamis of their own. And one of his students was actually my teacher. His name is Swami Tadatmananda, who is himself quite famous. He is the Swami at Arsha Bodha Center in Somerset, New Jersey. And when I was a student 1,000 years ago, a PhD student, he was the Swami at Arsha Vidya Gurukulam. And he was the one from whom I studied Gita and Vedanta and the Upanishads directly. So he's my direct teacher. And he's, of course, Swami Dayananda's teacher. And philosophically, there will be no daylight between anything that Swami Tadatmananda teaches versus what Swami Dayananda teaches versus what Swami Chinmayananda teaches. So it is essentially a long parampara. But of course, the source of it all, Sri Adi Shankaracharya. So the translation and the commentary that you asked me about the Gita, we used Shankaracharya's Gita Bhasya. I don't pull out the Gita Bhasya in Sanskrit because it's a lot of Sanskrit to pull out on the people who are attending. But Swamiji's commentary and translation are completely aligned. There is no daylight between what Swamiji's commentary, the one that I've written up there, and that provided in the Gita Bhashyam by Shankaracharya. Sometimes I will go to the Shankaracharya's Gita Bhashyam just for the sake of, sometimes you just want a little bit of change. So I'll go to the Bhashyam just to look at how Shankaracharya talked about it. This Tattva Bodha authorship is attributed to Sri Shankaracharya. And the translation and the commentary are 100% aligned with what Swami Dayananda has written, which is what Sri Shankaracharya teaches from And we will talk about the history of Sri Shankaracharya. If you ask me a question, so one of the things that you will notice about my teaching style is that I respond very well to questions. The more questions you ask me, the more depth I can get into, because it's very difficult for me to know who you are.
So nice weather.
Yeah, I went out with t-shirt. Nothing.
Good. Thank you, Kiran. It's very difficult. See, I don't know you personally. If I knew you personally, it would be a lot easier for me to conduct this class. But the best way for me to know you is for you to ask me a question. The moment you ask me a question, I understand a lot better as to where you are, what's probably bothering you, where is the pinch point in the understanding, and it allows me to get into some more depth and explain what's being talked about. So in this class and discussion, we encourage a lot of questions. I know it's a little bit unique because most traditions that I'm familiar with here, they don't necessarily encourage questions. They'll tell you, okay, this is what I want you to believe in. You know, when you have a setting where there are hundreds or thousands of students attending a lecture, there's no possibility of any student being able to ask a question and getting a direct answer. But that is not how Vedanta is taught. And that is very, very important to note. The only way, this is actually one of those unique things, the only way Vedanta can be taught is through direct discussion. Now you'll say, why do you say that is the only way it can be taught? Why can't I just read about it? Why can't I just read about it? Why can't I just hear about it? What is this emphasis on discussion?
Even going to discussion, what is Vedanta? I really don't know.
Exactly. So that's a great question. What is Vedanta is the first question so as I said, keep asking the questions, because your questions, you may think that the questions are simple, but they're generally not. They are quite in depth. The first question, of course, is, what is Vedanta? And why do I want to even study it? What is so
Bodh,
special?
what is it? Like, is it a chapter?
That's a great question. So how many of you have the question, what exactly is Vedanta? And I'm going to answer that question. I'm going to create a new slide so we can talk about it. What is Vedanta? And why do we even want to study it, right? That becomes the question. Fair enough. Fair enough. So, of course, the story begins with the Vedas, right? As Hindus, we've all heard of the Vedas. We know about them. The Vedas are not attributed human authorship. Amongst our entire tradition, the Vedas are the ones that are not attributed to human authorship at all. They are referred to as Shruti, that which has only been heard. If you could say revelations, yes, revelations, that which has only been heard, transmitted only through hearing. The Vedas are considered to have no human authorship.
Amit,
yeah,
question. So the Vedas, no human authorship, and it is Shruti. People are like us who heard as human beings, am I right? So what is that about them they could hear directly? And so is it possible to hear directly now?
Is it possible to hear directly? I don't know the answer to that question. I really don't know the answer to that question. The Vedas are considered to have no human authorship, are attributed no human authorship, but they have been given a compilership, right? We have said that they have been compiled by Ved Vyasa. Vyasa was the one who compiled them and distributed them into 4 Vedas, and those 4 Vedas are the ones that we are talking about. Is it possible to hear them? I don't know the answer to that question. I will tell you the answer to that question is actually very long. And I'll give you a couple of keywords here right now, and we can come back to these a little bit later. They are referred to as Shabda Pramana. So in the tradition of Vedanta, Pramanas are evidences. Pramanas are how you get to know certain things. So for example, in order to know color, you need to see it with your eyes. In order to hear sound, you need to hear it with your ears. So the pramana for the sound that you're hearing right now is your ear and the mind standing behind it. And there are multiple pramanas. Inference is identified as a pramana, direct observation, indirect inferences, and so on. But there is a pramana that is referred to as Shabda Pramana. And as to why the Shabda Pramana is attributed to being a Shabda Pramana, that you'll have to listen to Shankaracharya. It's a very involved answer. And we'll get to it. After we have a little more exposure to Vedanta, I'll bring the topic back to Shabda Pramana and we can talk about it. Right now, it won't make sense if I answer it just the way it is. So we'll come back to the topic of Shabda Pramana, but that Shabda Pramana is referred to as the Vedas. In the Vedas, there are the Karma Kanda.
I didn't like. Can you just tell a bit about Shabda Pramana? Like, what is it? Is it like Shabda, like someone has told it, and that's what we know?
Yeah. So the source of knowledge are words. That's really what it means. The source of knowledge are words. So in this case, it'll be a little difficult to explain right now because we need to arrive at the topic of Atma to be able to fully understand what we mean by the word Shabda Pramana. Let us say that you are looking for the mountain, right? You're looking for the mountain and you are telling me where is the mountain? Oh, yeah, I'll put it this way. Let's say that you are looking for a lake, but all you can see is the mountain. And you ask me for directions to the lake because you want to go for a swim. And I'll tell you, you follow the location to the mountain. When you get to the mountain, at the base of the mountain is the lake that you're looking for. Right? So I have given you evidence to follow. And when you get there, you're going to see the lake. So in a way, the pramana was only shabdas. Only words were telling you what is located where. At the same time, when you get there, you will no longer need the words. When you get the lake, my words are irrelevant, are they not? So when you get to the lake, the words are no longer important. In fact, the words did not convey the truth. Do you get it? So once you get to the lake, the words are no longer important. And they did not contain the truth. They did not contain the lake. If I were to tell you that my words contain the lake, it would be partially true, but it would be mostly wrong. Because my words don't contain the lake. In fact, I didn't tell you where the lake is. I told you to go to the mountain. It didn't even contain the lake directions properly. Just said you go to the mountain. Once you reach the mountain, you will see the lake. Now, perhaps where you were standing, you were seeing a shimmering light reflected off of the lake. And you were thinking, hey, why is there a shimmer at the base of the mountain? But you didn't know that was the lake that you were looking for. And so you thought that was just something else there. So Shabda Pramana does not contain the truth. At the same time, it does not contain the truth. It is not the one that will reveal the lake to you. At the same time, it is not the one that does not reveal the lake to you. Because the lake was always there. And you always knew it was there. It just clarified the mistake on what you were looking for and allowed you the opportunity to look at it a little more closely. It's a different kind of pramana. It's a pramana that removes...
Very well explained.
It's a pramana that removes incorrect conclusions. Because you were seeing what you needed to see, but you had concluded something erroneous about it. How many times have we conducted? I'll give you a great example. I'll give you a great example. How many times have you seen the sunrise? Answer, not very often. I wake up late. And that's true for me. It may not be true for you. Some of you may be early risers. I am not. How many times have you seen the sunset? Every day. How many times have you seen the moonrise? Oh, every night. I'm up at night. I'm a late night person. What if I were to tell you that the sun never set, but that you were rotating backwards? Shabda Praman doesn't contain the truth, but it is removing an error on the conclusion that you made, on the observation that you had made. Observations can lead to incorrect conclusions. They can sometimes disorient us to the point where we draw an incorrect conclusion. So in this case, the Shabda Pramana does not cause the sun to not rise. Is it true that the Shabda, because I revealed to you that the sun does not set, now the sun does not set? Well, the sun was never setting. There was an incorrect conclusion in your mind about it, which was revealed to be incorrect.
I think, like rather than, we just named it sunset, like we can't say this big, right? Oh, Earth is rotating, so we are moving away from the sun like that. We just named it sunset, like it's there.
Right,
right?
and just because I explained to you that the sun is not setting, does it take away its beauty? Not at all. You can every evening go out there and enjoy the beauty of the sky. You can see the new painting in the sky every night. And in your mind, you can always know that the sun is not setting. It is the earth that is rotating on its axis. Now, this is Shabda Praman. So the Vedas, which are attributed no human authorship, have the status of Shruti, which means that they have never been written by humans. They are considered Shabda Praman. And in that, the Vedas mostly contain karma kandas, which means that they contain instructions for conducting various rituals, yajnas, so on, for various results. That's referred to as the karma kanda. So there are many, many rituals that are described in the Vedas that you can conduct, finding the right ingredients, sitting in the right postures, and so on. The karma kanda portion of the Vedas are not the focus of what we are talking about. But towards the end, so chapters in the Vedas are referred in Sanskrit as Brahmanas. And at the end of various Brahmanas, chapters and sections, there is the Jnana-kanda portion of the Vedas. The Jnana-kanda portion of the Vedas ascribes no rituals. It does not describe any yajnas. It generally doesn't describe anything that needs to be done for any specific results. It is generally in the form of a conversation, and it is a philosophical discussion between a student and a teacher, generally. And these Gyan-kanda portions
These karmakans are also, so there are some brahmanas which are called karmakan, right? No?
Yeah, there are.
Okay.
These Jnana-kanda portions are what are referred to as Vedanta.
So
It is the anta of the Veda.
Amit Verma করছে এটা।
It is the, it is referred to as Vedanta. Vedanta means the end of the Veda. The end of the Veda. The funny thing is, the end of the Veda has two meanings. The end means the physical end of the Veda, and it can also mean the goal of the Veda. It is the Anta, where it is headed, where it was headed all along. That is referred to as Vedanta. And that Vedanta is the Jnana-kanda portions of the Veda. So Vedanta is directly inside the Veda. And most of these are referred to as Upanishads. So you must have heard the word Upanishads. There are many. There is Isha Upanishad, Kena Upanishad, Katha Upanishad, Mundaka, Mandukya, Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Some major ones, and then there are some minor ones. And this whole distinction between major and minor is only because Shankaracharya wrote commentary on 10 of them, and they came to be referred to as major. All the Upanishads are equally major. And all the Upanishads occur inside the Veda. So they are Shruti. They are Shabda Pramana. The authorship is attributed to no one, no human. The Upanishads that you have heard about, this Upanishad and that Upanishad, they are all inside the Veda. They are in the Jnana-kanda portion of the Veda. They're directly inside the Veda. And that's why they have the ultimate status of knowledge and the provider of this knowledge that we are talking about. That's why they are referred to as the Jnana-kanda. The Upanishads are almost always in the form of a discussion between a student and a teacher, which is mind-blowing, right? This is a 5,000-year-old, who knows how many thousand-year-old text, who cares how old they are? They're ancient. And these ancient texts, they could have written a description just like that, a prose, but they did not. They wrote it as a discussion. Most of the Upanishads are a discussion between two people, sometimes a discussion between multiple people. But more often than not, it's a discussion between a student and a teacher. That's the way the Upanishads are written.
So,
and that is referred to as Vedanta. Yes, Archana, what do you?
So Upanishad cannot be just called the Shruti. There are authors for Upanishads.
No, Upanishads are also Shruti.
Okay.
So it is at the highest status of, so Upanishads, because their Vedas are part of the Shruti. So when you hear a Upanishad, you are actually listening to the Veda. You are listening to Shruti. You are listening to something that has no human authorship. It has been revealed as such. Now, so this is so there are many Upanishads, as you know. 10 of these Upanishads. By the way, the word Upanishad really means just come near, sit and talk. That's what the word Upanishad means. Upanishad is sit near to me and let's have a discussion. That's really what the word Upanishad means. Come sit, let's have a conversation about this. Let's see if we can understand this or not. 10 of these Upanishads, Shankaracharya wrote Bhashyam on them. Shankaracharya has Bhashyams or commentaries on them, and they are referred to as the major Upanishads. Some of them I already named, some I may have missed. But I don't want you to think the word major or minor applies, because some of the Upanishads, like the Amrit Bindu Upanishad, is not one that Shankaracharya has written a commentary on, but it is just as significant, if not revealing, Upanishad as the others. The other thing that is important to understand, each of these Upanishads says the same thing. There is no daylight between reading and interpreting one Upanishad versus the other. They do not contradict each other. There is absolutely no daylight in between the Upanishads, in between the Vedas. So some of these Upanishads are located in Atharva Ved, some of them are located in Sam Ved, some of them are located in Yajurved. There is no daylight between what one Upanishad says versus the other. They all say the same thing. What do they say? Well, that is the subject matter that we will get to, because they say something. They have something to say. They had something to say, and they put it at the end of the Veda. It was, and therefore it is referred to as Vedanta, the goal of the Veda, where it was going all along. And if you want to read Vedanta in its purest form, Vedanta in its purest form is in the Upanishads, because it literally is the Vedanta. It occurs at the end of the Veda. It is Shruti. It has no human authorship. it is considered a revelation text.
So Vedanta and Upanishads, they are synonyms?
They are not. And I'm about to explain why they're not exactly synonyms of each other. Because Vedanta became used as a more, so I'll put it this way. The Upanishads occur in the Vedas and their subject matter is a specific Gyan. Whatever book covers that same exact Gyan without any daylight in between the two can be referred to as Vedanta. Can be. All right. In colloquial language, when we say Vedanta, we mean all of them that have exactly the same knowledge. Officially, Vedanta would only mean the Upanishads. What is important here to be noted is where is the Gita?
Yeah, what's even the difference between Vedanta and Gita?
Yeah. So that's the next question. Wait a minute. This is all well and nice, but what happened to the Gita? I thought we were studying the most important text. So we talked about Shruti, right? The Shruti is the Vedas. No deal, nothing, no two ways about it. That's pretty much it. There is nothing else that will be referred to as Shruti in the canon. When the word Shruti is used, it's only meant for Vedas.
Professor, it's Amit here. Just a quick question. It may sound slightly academic. When we were talking about Upanishads being Shruti, at the same time that these are conversations between a guru and a disciple, right? Then there must be, and I haven't read these texts, but there must be a mention of who the guru was and who the disciple was. And in a sense, it's chronicling that conversation. It no longer becomes something that's heard outside the domain of, a human intervention, so to speak, for lack of a better term. But whereas my understanding of Shruti was that when these great sages used to sit and meditate in the forests and the Himalayas, they used to experience certain things which they used to orally transmit to their disciples. And that's how the origin of the Vedas came about. It was an experience in a different state of consciousness. Whereas if you're talking about conversations, they are happening at the plane of, for example, you and me at this time.
Amit, I'm going to agree with you and I'm going to disagree with you. I'm going to agree with you in concept. I'm going to agree with you that, yes, that is another way to understand what Shabda Pramana is. Once again, the conversation between the Guru and the Shishya will be about where is the lake.
Mm-hmm.
The Guru, in this case, will tell the Shishya, where is the lake? And will tell the Shishya that you have seen the lake. You just did not understand that you were staring at the lake. And so, in a way, even in those conversations, Jnana is revealed in a very interesting way. And we'll see that. We'll see what is meant here by the discussion. As far as the topic of revelations versus a discussion or discovery of knowledge, I won't argue with that in the sense that, yes, it is very well possible that there were rishis who have written the Vedas or have compiled them. But for a very technical reason, Shankaracharya does not attribute it specifically like that. He attributes it as Shabda Pramana in his discussions. And it's a logical tool that he uses in order to set up a certain discussion. And when we get to the topic of Shabda Pramana, I'll come back to this. But for us to come back to why Shankaracharya did it the way he did it, we will have to wait a little bit, because what is important here is that we have not talked at all about the subject matter. Once the subject matter is revealed, it'll make a lot more sense as to what potentially could have been the discussions that were had. So I'll give you a simple example. When we talk about knowledge, we talk about finding out new objects, new thoughts, new ideas. That's what knowledge is, as far as we know. You can tell me there are more attributes I can add. You can add objects, you can add relationships, you can add so many things that we know about knowledge. What is the subject matter of Vedanta is none of them. They're not. They're just not the subject matter of what is referred to as Gyan here. So what is the subject matter of the Gyan? And the subject matter of the Gyan is very interesting. It is something other than all of them. And so the question becomes, hey, if it is something other than them, is it going to be an object in my mind or not? Right? Everything I know is an object in my mind. No matter what it is. It could be the square root of -1, I could care less. Could be a Laplace transform. It is an object in my mind. It may not be a physical object that I can reach out and touch. It may be entirely an intellectual idea, but it is an object in my mind. It is a thought. It is an idea. Is it that? And the answer is going to be no, it is not that. And if it is not that, then what is it? Is it ever going to appear in my mind? The answer is no. Well, then if it is never going to appear in my mind, then how am I going to know? Is it something to be known? The answer is yes and no. So am I ever going to know it or not? That is a simple question. And the answer is, it will not be known the way we know objects. It will be revealed as the subject itself. And that is the subject matter of the entire. So all of Tattva Bodha got rolled down into that one sentence that I just said. But we will see the process by which this revelation occurs. So even when you say that I'm in a higher state of consciousness, you use that term, so I want to go back to that. What does that mean? Are there no objects in the mind? Do I not yet have thoughts or ideas? Are those thoughts and ideas got different attributes than normal thoughts and ideas? Fair enough, but do they still have attributes? The answer is yes. So when you say I have a higher state of consciousness, I don't know what that means. As long as it is an object in my mind, it is an object in my mind. Now, how fancy it gets, how subtle it gets, how esoteric and intellectual it gets doesn't matter as long as it's an object in my mind. It is not a higher state of consciousness. It is just an object that is more subtle than the hardcore objects that I was looking at earlier. The idea of color. Yes, the color of my shirt is red. But if you ask a physicist, they're going to have a very different, if you ask an optician, they'll have a very different explanation on that. If you ask somebody who's got better understanding of Raman spectroscopy, is going to give a different answer than that. No matter how subtle you make your understanding of the color red, it won't be anything but an object in your mind. That part won't go away. So this higher state of consciousness discussion, we'll have to come back to it. It's going to play an important role in what is meant by the jivas. Jiva means being, antakarna, inner instrument. What is the scope of this inner instrument? How far does it go? And what is the subject matter here? We haven't arrived at it. We'll talk about it. It gets very interesting. One of the things that I really love about this Vedanta class, the Tattva Bodha class, is people like you, because you ask such great questions that allow us to get into some very subtle topics. And maybe, as I said earlier, I won't be able to answer all of them today in the first session. If you expected me to be able to make everything clear to you in the first session, that's not going to happen. It's going to take, you got to give it 10, at least 10 sessions before you say, this doesn't make any sense at all. Coming back to the question, the subject question that was, what happened to the Gita? We talked about the Shruti, which are the Vedas, fair enough. But then there are also the Smritis. What are the Smritis? The Smritis are Ramayana, the Mahabharata. What does the word Smriti mean? Does I remember? Does I remember? Iti itihasa. This is what happened. So it happened. Itihasa, so it literally means, does it happen? So the Smritis are remembrances, are texts that are written from memory. They are human authorship. Valmiki is the author of the Ramayana. Mahabharata is attributed to Vedvyas, the same person who does the division of the Vedas. And we'll understand a little bit more. If you think about it, Shankaracharya, was there one Shankaracharya? Or was that the whole school that was known as Shankaracharya? We'll revisit that topic a little bit later. But what happens inside the Mahabharata? Is located the crowning jewel of the Mahabharata, which is the Gita. What is the Gita? So the Gita is a very unique text. As we will see, the Tattva Bodha will talk about knowledge. The subject matter of all of Vedanta is, of course, the Atma, the self, and Brahman, the reality. In fact, the word Tattva Bodha, if you indulge me just a moment, I want to tell you what the meaning of the word Tattva Bodha is. Bodha literally means knowledge. Tat means that. Literally, tat means that. And tva, when you add the tva to the tat, it becomes the essence of that. Knowledge of the essence of that. Or you could say it is the knowledge of the reality of that. So the subject matter of the Tattva Bodha is reality. Reality of what? Reality of everything. So all the Upanishads are generally going to talk about what is the true reality of the Jiva, what is the true reality of the Jagat, what is the true reality of Ishvara. That is the subject matter of all the Upanishads. And the Gita, the subject matter of the Gita, is all of that. And there is not a single daylight between what Bhagavan Sri Krishna says in the Gita and what is said in the Upanishads. In fact, there are verses in the Gita that are literally the same verses from the Upanishads, just like that. One word or one word moved here or there for a poetic meter. There are multiple verses where Bhagavan is revealing reality, where he uses directly the verses from the Upanishads, just like that. There is not a single piece of daylight between what Bhagavan Sri Krishna says and what is inside the Upanishads. That's great. That's great to hear. But what makes Gita so special? Because, the Upanishads also cover it. Well, the Gita does it in a very, how should I put it? In a very simple way. The Gita uses simple words. The Upanishads can get a bit esoteric. The words, the visualizations that are used in the Upanishads, they're a bit older. They're a bit more ancient. They get a little more esoteric. They can become harder to follow. But Bhagavan Sri Krishna simplifies all of that without compromising on the content of the knowledge and provides it in the Gita. In many places, the Gita is referred to as the Gita Upanishad. But that's not what makes Gita special. There is one more thing that makes Gita absolutely the go-to text for everyone. Because all the Shruti, all the Vedanta, all the Upanishads tell us about the reality of everything, which of course the Gita does too, exactly the same way. But it also includes how to prepare the mind for that knowledge. It includes the knowledge of yoga. It includes both the knowledge of jnana and yoga. That's what makes it special, because it covers them both. There are many texts that cover jnana. but there are very few texts that cover both Gyan and Yoga. The Yoga Sutras of Patanjali being another one. But Bhagwan does a very special job in covering Yoga and Jnana both. He gives them equal attention. Perhaps I would say he gives more attention to Yoga sometimes. There are specific chapters where he just talks about how to prepare the mind. That is what makes Gita the go-to text for everything. Because not only does it have Jnana, it also has the preparatory material to prepare the mind through yoga for understanding. One of the key terms that we're going to come across in Tattva Bodha in the very first verse is going to be adhikari. Adhikaritvam. Adhikaritvam is just having the prerequisite knowledge, the preparation of the mind to be able to understand what is being talked about. There is a certain mental orientation, a certain level of understanding that is needed, a certain preparation that is needed, which is referred to as adhikaritvam. That adhikaritvam, Bhagavan also provides the path to get there in the Gita, which makes it a very special text. If you can cover both yoga and jnana to the level that Bhagavan Shri Krishna does, that's why it's the crowning jewel of the Smriti, which is the Mahabharata. That is Gita.
So Gita will be then the Smriti.
Gita would count as Smriti. That is correct. But it has a very special status in the sense that it is referred to as Gita Upanishad. And therefore, it is also referred to as Vedanta. So you asked me earlier, is Vedanta always Upanishad? Yes. But any text that covers the same Gyan with the same level of clarity would be considered canonically Vedanta. So when we colloquially talk about Vedanta, we are having a discussion about Vedanta, but we're not directly citing the Upanishad right now. And there is one more. Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam. So there are three. Shruti, Smriti, and Puranas. Shruti is up there. Vedas, Upanishads are Shruti. Smriti is Ramayana, Mahabharata. And by the way, the Gita is not the only place where Atma Bodh or Tattva Gyan is talked about. It occurs multiple times in the Gita. Whenever Vidur is talking, whenever Vidur is having a conversation with somebody knowledgeable, you will come across all of this Atma Gyan again. There are multiple locations, multiple conversations that occur in the overall Mahabharata that will be pretty much in line with what we are referring to as Upanishads and Vedanta. Similarly, the Puranas are these ancient, I guess, historical story-based texts that are available. There is the Skanda Purana, there is the Bhagavad Purana, there are many Puranas. Some of them you've heard stories from, some of them you might have read excerpts from, you might have come across them in comics when you were children you still read them, I still read them whenever I feel like it. There are many, many, many stories. Puranas, even when they were written, they were referred to as ancient. So it's ancient of the ancient. It's some historical tradition of stories that has been communicated. In those Puranas, often you will come across discussion of Atmagyan. Very often. Within the stories, they will create circumstances where two of the characters will be having a conversation and they'll be generally just covering Vedanta. So even in the Puranas, you will find often discussions of self-knowledge, discussions of yoga, buried in different stories. Right now in the Gita class, what ended up happening was that we are covering a story from the Purana. We are right now spending a bit of time studying Gajendra Moksham, the story. The story of Gajendra Moksham occurs inside the Bhagavad Purana, also referred to as Srimad Bhagavatam. And it was a question that prompted us to go in that direction. And it's absolutely beautiful. the Gajendra Moksham, particularly the prayers that Gajendra submits, because they're 100% aligned with what is traditionally referred to as knowledge, Gyan, Atma Gyan. It's going to be 100% aligned with that. What we end up finding is that whether you're looking at Shruti or Smriti or Puranas, when it comes to the topic of Gyan, there is 100% alignment in all of them. The contexts may be different, the stories may be different, but when it comes to the topic of Atma and Brahman, when it comes to the topic of Maya, when it comes to the topic of self-knowledge, there is no daylight between them. So then the question becomes, where does the Tattva Bodha fit in? Because last time I checked, we're not studying the Shruti, we're not studying the Smriti, we're not studying the Purana. So what are we studying? So the Tattva Bodha falls in the category of a Prakarana Granth. A Prakarana Granth is written by a teacher in order to provide further explanation, and it is completely aligned with the teachings of the Shruti, the Smriti, the Purana. In this case, this Prakarana Granth, Prakarana is methodology. Granth is it's a methodology text. It is literally a text that he wrote in order to explain Vedanta terminology to his students. So it's the first text of Vedanta that we need to look at. There are many other Prakarana Granths, you've heard of them. Vivek Chudamani is a Prakarana Granth. Drishya Viveka is a Prakarana Granth. There are many such. Atma Bodha is a Prakarana Granth. These are Prakarana Granths are written by teachers, ancient teachers, in order to help their students prepare themselves for the understanding of the same knowledge. The Prakarana Granth contains the same. For it to have a standard, for it to be accepted in the canon as a Prakarana Granth, it has to have full alignment with Jnana as described in the Shruti, in the Smriti, in the Puranas. That's required. So Prakarana Granthas, what we like about Prakarana Granthas are that they are simple, they are straightforward, or simpler, you could say, to follow. Particularly the ones written by Shankaracharya are quite logical. He sets up a paddhiti. Essentially, he provides a paddhiti. What is a paddhiti? A methodology. He literally developed a curriculum to teach Vedanta. That is his biggest contribution. The bhashyas that Shankaracharya provides are excellent. Those bhashyas fall within a construct of a curriculum because their teaching was a bit haphazard before Shankaracharya comes along. So what he did was he organized everything. He organized it so that you could connect from one Upanishad to the other. When the Gita shlokas are talking about something, he'll remind you that this occurs in that Upanishad. He'll provide the reference to that. So he organizes the knowledge in a logical way. He was in 8th century. This was a more modern in its context. The Puranas are ancient. The Smritis are ancient. The Shruti has no authorship. Those are very ancient texts. So what happens with the advent of Shankaracharya is that he says, okay, I'm going to organize this into a nice curriculum so that my students can follow it better and understand. And at the top of it, he puts Tattva Bodha. He says, here's the book that I want you to start with. So this becomes the opening salvo, if you will, of the study of Vedanta. Don't get me wrong. Everything that is there in the Upanishads is there in Tattva Bodha too. He doesn't compromise on content. He doesn't compromise on depth. But he provides the opening chapter, if you will. He provides the opening salvo for us to be able to appreciate what is being talked about. Now, the Vivek Chudamani has more than 600 verses. It's a very long text. When we covered Vivek Chudamani, we did only 108 selected verses from it. Even the Vivek Chudamani, right? So this is very important to appreciate. We do not object to you adding a verse to whatever it is that you are writing. And as long as it is in keeping with the tradition as long as it is in keeping with the understanding of Atma, nobody's going to object to it. So a lot of students over time have added contributions because it was 100% aligned with what is being talked about. Because does it really matter who wrote it as long as the subject matter is absolutely clear and completely aligned with what is being talked about? And this will become a little more clear when the subject matter is emerged. When the subject matter becomes clear, it'll become evident that, yeah, there are many, many Mahavakyas. So I want to give you an example of a Mahavakya. They are referred to as Mahavakyas. You've heard them before. Aham Brahmasmi.
Professor?
Yeah.
Sorry. Again, I'm not sure whether I'm jumping the gun here. But to the point that you mentioned that the knowledge systems, or when it comes to the question of knowledge, there is no difference between these texts. For example, if you take Srimad Bhagavad Gita or the Upanishads and so on. Now, coming from the point of view of Adi Shankaracharya, I believe, and that's my understanding. You can correct me if I'm wrong. He was the person credited with developing the school of Advaita Vedanta, right? But there are other thought processes or schools of thought as well, right? There's Dvaita, and I think there are others as well. So, do they also, credit Upanishads with their source? And if that is the case, then is there no difference between these two, or let's say Advaita or Dvaita, or is there a difference in also the approach to knowledge or the end result as well?
What a brilliant question. It's at the heart of everything we are going to talk about. The question is very loaded, Amit. I won't be able to answer it all in one shot. It would be like drinking the ocean, but we can drink it one glass at a time. But that's what we're going to try and do. We're going to try and drink it one glass at a time every week. Who created Advaita Vedanta is your first question. Is it Shankaracharya? The answer is no. No. Shankaracharya did not create a philosophical school of thought. Whoever says that does not understand Vedanta at all. Vedanta has always been the same. Whether you pick it up from Vasishtha Yoga, which is the teachings from Vasishtha to Rama, all the way to the Bhagavad Gita, it has always been the same. So Shankaracharya does not create Advaita Vedanta. But then you say, wait a minute, but there is a Dvaita. So who created Dvaita? That is going to be very interesting. We will have to go into the discussion of what is meant by Dvaita, what is meant by Advaita. But then you answered the question almost yourself, because you said, what is the difference in the end game, right? What is the difference at the end game? And that is at the heart of the word moksha. That is at the heart of the word moksha. And the first verse of the Tattva Bodha that we just chanted, right, to begin with, Vasudevendra Yogindram Nattva Jnanapradam Guru Mumukshu Nam Hitarthaya Tattva Bodho Abhidhyate. Mumukshu is the one who is Ikshu of moksha. The subject matter is moksha. And your question is absolutely on point. What do you mean by moksha? What does the Advaitin mean by the word moksha? What does the Dvaitin mean by the word moksha? What does the Vishishta Advaitin mean by the word moksha? There are more schools of thought in Hinduism than Advaita. There is Dvaita, there is Vishishta Advaita, then there is there's more. There's about 6 of them. I don't remember all of them right now offhand, but there's more. Are there schools of thought? How do we understand and interpret them? You'll have to go on the journey with me for a little while, and we will see them. We will see them. We will get a chance to see them. But the topic of moksha is really at the heart of it all. And this is where I need my blackboard. So the first time I did Tattva Bodha, we had a very nice blackboard in the classroom, and I was able to walk around and write many, many notes on the board. Can't do that in the Zoom session. Doesn't work out for that purpose. But moksha from what? What does moksha mean? That is the subject matter. In fact, the first 5 to 10 sessions of the Tattva Bodha, we won't be able to get going because we will get stuck right away in the next verse saying, what is moksha? Sadhana chatushtaya sampanna adhikarinam moksha sadhana bhutam tattva viveka prakaram vakshyama. This is verse 1. That's why it's a prakarana granth. It gets right to the subject matter. Verse 1. What is there? Moksha sadhana bhutam. It is the instrument that can make moksha possible. It begs the question, what is moksha? Which begs the question, what is dharma? Which begs the question, what is artha? What is kama? So we won't be able to make much progress in the text to begin with, because we have to get reoriented to understand what is being talked about. So a quick answer to your question, because we're running out of time here, is that no, Shankaracharya is not the creator of Advaita Vedanta. Advaita Vedanta, in fact, the word Advaita is not even needed. Vedanta is Vedanta. And we're going to study Vedanta. The word Advaita will be put in there only if you want it to be there, only if you need it to be there.
Sorry, I was not actually, I meant to say that he is credited with almost single-handedly reviving the school of Advaita Vedanta at that point in time of history of India, I would say.
So, sure, as I mentioned earlier, what Shankaracharya does, in my opinion, and now this is a matter of discussion between Panditas, it doesn't focus on the subject matter of, we can talk about what Shankaracharya did, or we can talk about, or we can actually read what he did. When we talk about what he did, I would stand by my original statement. In my opinion, my understanding, Shankaracharya organized the literature in such a way that it could actually be followed similar to a curriculum to a certain extent for people to understand. Shankaracharya comes after the Buddhists, right? And the Buddhists were quite logical in their approaches. And he does that. He puts it in more of a linear logic. What you will find in Shruti, for example, the Upanishads, I said they're esoteric. And if you read them, you'll find them to be a bit esoteric. It's not quite straightforward. The Bhagavad Gita, because it covers both yoga and jnana at the same time, it can get confusing on whether you're reading yoga or you're reading jnana, unless you know what you're reading. The Puranas, of course, put it all in story format. And so the logic becomes a bit circular in the sense that it's hard to understand what is going from point A to point B. So Shankaracharya did not, I would say that in my understanding, or in my opinion, the biggest contribution is that he said it in such a way that people given to linear logic like us will be able to appreciate it much easier. At the end of it, now this is important. Does Advaita Vedanta, or any kind of Vedanta for that matter, reveal to me something I don't know? Give me a new object, a new thought, a new idea? No.
Compared to?
What it does do is it removes an incorrect conclusion. Just as I'm standing there and I'm seeing the sunset, and I'm looking at the sunset, Vedanta is here to tell me, enjoy the sunset, but know that the sun is not setting. What it will reveal to me will actually complete my experience of the sunset, because it will reveal what is true about it. What is the reality behind it? I have made an incorrect conclusion about it. The observation has misled me, or I have used some sort of erroneous logic to arrive at a conclusion. Living in the world of objects, I seem to have confused the self with an object when it is not. Vedanta does not introduce the self to me. It cannot. Nothing can. Do I need to introduce you to you? I do not. You already know you. What I can do is remove your incorrect conclusion about you. That's what Vedanta is about. Whether you want to call it Advaita or Dvaita or Vishishta Advaita, we will talk about that later. We will see how it comes about. I will tell you an example that my Swamiji gave me, which helped me for a while to to appreciate. The ocean, the wave, and the water, all there. From a perspective, there is nothing but water. Where is the ocean? You show me. Where is the wave? You show me. You show me the wave, I only see water. I can only touch water. The wave makes me just as wet as the ocean, which makes me just as wet as the water. Where is the wave? Where is the ocean? All I see is water. On the other hand, you can tell me, no, no, no. You see the waves, they come up and then they dissolve right back into the ocean. Yes. Cannot deny that experience, that the wave indeed emerges from the ocean and dissolves right back into the ocean. But I gotta ask you, where is the wave? Where is the ocean? All I see here is water. In that analogy that is now in your mind, there is ocean and there is space. Take away the space. There's only ocean. Which one is, what am I referring to as the ocean? All I see is water. This idea of having a wave separate from an ocean and so on. Hello? Yeah? Not yet. I'm finishing up the class. Let me finish it up and I'll call you right back. Yeah. Oh, I have to go. Apparently it's 12:30. I've taken too long in this class. We will come back right where to this topic is next time. It'll again be a Saturday morning. I believe I'm traveling back. Yeah. If you're okay with stopping, we didn't even get to do introductions this time. I guess we'll do them next time if you're all here. If you want to do a quick introduction, there's no such thing as a quick introduction. I really do want to know you all before it's too late. If with your permission, I can close the session for today.
So the one last thing, is it possible to have the discussions on Saturday itself rather than Friday?
That I will leave to my boss, Vidit. Vidit,
you can do a poll if you want.
Yeah,
like
it
will be based on your
can,
availability, Professor. I think like if you are.
I'm generally available on Saturday morning too.
What about Saturday evenings?
We can. I will do whatever is needed to be done. We'll let Vidit conduct the poll and give me some instructions.
Sure. Okay. I have talked to Ram, so okay, Vidit, can you?
Yeah, so
do a poll or like whatever.
Yeah, whatever everyone is comfortable with, based on when the professor is available and based on when you all are available also.
So there's a WhatsApp group for our Vedanta class. So please kind of join that WhatsApp group and we'll have this discussion of what is the best time for the class there.
Yeah,
as well, and possibly put the poll there. So I think we
put the link over there. If you want, I can put the link again. Does everyone see the link? It's in the chat.
Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Thank you, Amitji.
Thank you.
अमित जी बहुत अच्छा था. अमित जी बहुत अच्छा था. Very interesting discussion to know what the Vedanta is, what the Shrutis are, and what are all those. Thank you, Ji.
Thank you.
Very simple way you have explained.
Thank you. After the pandemic subsides a little bit, we can talk about meeting in a classroom. We can still do the Zoom from the classroom, but we can talk about meeting in a classroom. And
don't discard us.
No, we'll still have the Zoom. We'll still have the Zoom, but we may want to. And then there is the Vivekananda house, right? I have wanted to do a session directly in the house and broadcast from there, so I may do that in the near future as well. Okay. Bye for now.
Thank you, Professor.
Professor.